What's up, folks? Welcome to a new video. Finally, it looks like we've voted in some politicians that are actually going to represent most of the electorate. As this article from the Express goes over, the Tories are considering boycotting BBC Newsnight over fears its new editor, Lewis Goodall, is anti-Boris. And if anybody's seen his Twitter feed, he's pretty anti-Brexit as well. Before I get into the article itself, if you're not sure who Lewis Goodall is, he's the reporter, I'm doing quotation marks here, who sounds more like a Labour Party activist who you've no doubt spotted on Sky News over the past year, shitting all over Brexit and Boris. Well, it turns out when he was a little bit more wet behind the ears, he was an actual Labour Party activist, as this self-description at the top of a Guardian article of his tells us. Also, when Boris won the leadership election, the contest for the Tories, this was his response on Twitter. So great to share a set with Black Mirror. Really impartial there, Lewis. Well done, you tit. I'm sure a few of you will remember that time that he chased Cummins down the street as well, asking him about the Ben Act, and Cummins just made him look like a complete arsehole.
Will the Prime Minister, on October the 17th, if he hasn't got a deal, be writing a letter to the European Council asking for an extension of Article 50, yes or no?
You're confused about the date. You don't even know the basics of the subject that you're asking about.
Right, in late October, the Prime Minister is supposed to be having to ask for an extension.
Do you know what date the Ben Act talks about?
It's supposed to be having to ask for an extension.
Do you know what date the Ben Act talks about?
The European Council on October the 17th, and shortly after that, if there is no deal...
What date is it the Ben Act?
Shortly after that, in early October, I forget the exact date off the top of my head, but it doesn't matter. You know as well as I do that it is in late October, so let's not try and be...
Another clueless journalist.
Another clueless journalist.
That last line, another clueless journalist, that's about as apt as you can get for a description of Lewis Goodall. Anyway, let's crack on with this article from the Express. Cabinet ministers are set to boycott BBC's Newsnight programme over fears its new policy editor, Lewis Goodall, is anti-Tory and will treat them unfairly. The journalist is set to move from Sky News to the Beeb this month, where he will take up the role of policy editor for the flagship show on current affairs, hosted by Emily Matlis. Mr Goodall, who has worked for the BBC in the past, has been an outspoken critic of the Prime Minister and has been accused by Leave supporters of being anti-Brexit, which is pretty much what I've just gone through in the rest of the video, so I won't go through it again. The 30-year-old compared Mr Johnson's comments, likening burqa-clad Muslim women to bank robbers, with former Tory MP Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech, which saw him warn against possible consequences of mass immigration. He hit out at Mr Johnson's use of words, writing in a blog post that if the same comments had been said by a working class person, they would not have been met with the same response. Imagine the words said with an Essex, Yorkshire or Brummie accent. Imagine them being said not by Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson, but by a labourer on camera for a clip on the 6 o'clock news. I still think you'd get the same reaction from the plebs up north, like we don't care, we found it a little bit funny, we found it a little bit offensive, some of us did, so... But that's Boris. He says what's on its mind. Like, you need to get used to that because there's going to be a lot more of it over the next at least 5 years. He went on to say Mr Johnson's words could be seen as prejudiced, ignorant, rude, vulgar, and yes, probably racist. Of course, Lewis, just reach for that fucking racist card, why don't you? Brexit supporters have accused Mr Goodall of being an anti-Brexit activist. Well, he is, to be honest with you. He's more of a Labour activist than an anti-Brexit activist, but he is one of the two at least. In September, Mr Goodall confronted the Prime Minister's top aide Dominic Cummings. That's what I've just shown you on the video there, so we won't go through that one again. He accused Cummings in that interview later on of whipping up, him and Boris, of whipping up an atmosphere of danger for MPs with their rhetoric, just totally missing the point that for 3 years the Remainers had basically stuck two fingers up to democracy. How can you be so blind or so biased to call out Boris and Cummings for being so pro-Leave when the rest of the establishment has been so pro-Remain for so long? You are just showing your obvious bias there, Lewis. The Mail on Sunday quoted a senior advisor to a cabinet minister saying, "There is no way I am going to let my minister go in front of someone like Goodall, and plenty of others feel the same way. Newsnight has been moving off our radar for years. This will just speed up the process," which is a feeling across the country, not necessarily for BBC Newsnight, but for the BBC in general. A lot of us have found other ways to get our news and get our entertainment. Like, I've not paid a licence fee for 7 years now legally. Why bother when you've got things like Netflix, Disney, Amazon, and you've got free stuff like Twitch and YouTube? There is just no need to be shelling out for a TV tax that's completely out of date, especially for what the BBC pump out as well. They've got a very, very liberalism. They're all HQ is full of Guardian newspapers, so you know where they sit on the political divide. They're wishy-washy, politically correct lefties. But anyway, carrying on with the article. Newsnight editor Esme Wren said Mr Goodall would bring fresh insight and a rich knowledge of the political landscape to the programme. Willie bollocks, he is absolutely useless. She also hailed him as an exceptional journalist, of course, just sticking up for her friends. Mr Goodall announced the news in a series of tweets saying he was delighted to be joining the show, which has proven itself the place to be for making sense of our increasingly mad politics. The Tories' boycott of the Beeb follows Mr Johnson's comments on the election campaign trail about the controversial TV licence fee. He hinted that the annual payment viewers have to fork out, which currently stands at £154.50, could be scrapped. And honestly, it should be. And I think as soon as BritBox gets off the ground, if it gets off the ground, if they can rake in a decent amount of subscription fees, this government probably will scrap the licence fee. They'll at least scrap it for the most vulnerable, I think, like completely. And I don't know, you might be able to get away with a reduction. A lot of people do still like the BBC. They do still look to the BBC. It's generally the older generation for the news. So if you just brought it down a little bit, you might get some people more willing. Personally, I'd rather have it scrapped. Let it go to advertising if it needs to. The British public should not be paying for something that's not what it says on the tin. The BBC have clearly got some sort of bias, and the amount of anti-Brexit propaganda that comes out of them is unreal. And pushing this 100 genders shite recently is just the icing on the cake, really, for them. Everybody's a bit fed up with them. They've got a very London-centric woke view, and we've had enough of paying TV tax, so balls to you. He said the government was not planning to get rid of all TV licence fees, although I am certainly looking at it. The public service broadcaster was hit with a staggering 24,435 complaints in the run-up to the election, many of which accused it of lacking impartiality. And I'm sure the employment of Lewis Goodall is really, really going to help the BBC in that department. I can't think of a more biased journalist in the UK at the moment. He was a Labour Party activist. He still sounds like a Labour Party activist, and at the very least, he is an anti-Tory activist. That's it for this one. If you did enjoy the video, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, and take care, folks.